I believe we have a quorum, and we'll be ready to start reconvening the Budget Committee, and would like to invite Bob Cozy to come and present on Central Dispatch. Thank you for being here today.
Great, thank you.
See you, Bob.
I'm Bob Cozy, Director of Clackamas County Central Dispatch. We're also known as CCOM or Clackamas County 911. We answer 911 for the majority of Clackamas County. There's another public safety answering point. The term is called PSAP, if you haven't heard that before, called LOCOM, which is Lake Oswego 911, and they answer for the city of Lake Oswego, as well as West Lynn, and Dispatch Milwaukee Police as well. CCOM, Clackamas 911, handles all of the rest of Clackamas County, certainly the lion's share. I'm here today to talk about our budget, and I always like to start with our mission and vision. We haven't gone through the MFR process yet. We're actually starting it next week. But I am very proud of our mission and vision. It's something that we as an agency developed probably about 10 years ago, collectively with dispatch input. We have yearly training sessions, and we ran an entire training day going through our collective mission and determining what we wanted to be known as. And I'll start off by reading that. Clackamas County 911 provides superior public safety dispatch services in a skilled, expedient, and respectful manner to the citizens and agencies we serve. With a commitment to excellence and through continuing education and improved technology, we help save lives, protect property, and proudly know we make a difference. In that process, we developed core agency values which fall very well in line with the core values of Clackamas County. I'd like to say we came up with it first because it was about 10 years ago that we did this. But service, respect, trust, and understanding are our core agency values. Our total budget is $8,396,617. We don't receive any direct general fund dollars, although I say that with a caveat because the Sheriff's Office is our largest agency that does help fund us. So about 47% of the user fees come directly from the Sheriff's Office budget, which does come from the general fund then. Our sources of revenue are member agency fees, which are about $5.4 million, and our 911 telephone tax, which we're estimating next year to be about $1.6 million. Quite a few years ago, there was some legislation to ensure that wireless devices were taxed. We weren't receiving revenue on a lot of wireless devices, the type of cell phones that you might buy at Walmart, track phones, those kinds of things. They weren't taxed, and we weren't able to gain any revenue on those devices. But the state legislature passed a law a few years ago, and now we are beginning to see that revenue. After this next fiscal year, I expect that our revenue stream will remain fairly flat, so I wouldn't expect it to go up substantially above the $1.6 million that we're estimating. As far as our accomplishments, one of the most noteworthy is we completed interest arbitration this past year. It was a lengthy process, a very difficult and challenging process, but the county's case prevailed. And as a result, the dispatch schedule changed. It was a 35-hour average work week. Anything over that was paid at overtime. Now with the arbitrator's decision, the dispatchers are working a 40-hour work week, 4 days on, 3 days off, and everything beyond that then is overtime. So that shifted quite a bit in terms of the culture at CCOM. Of course, it hasn't been that long ago that we received that decision, and it has impacted morale. But one of the things that we heard throughout the testimony from the dispatch side was, you know, if we go to that 4-3 schedule, I'm going to look for another job. I'm going to quit. Well, thankfully, we have very professional staff, and even though they said that in the heat of the moment, we haven't lost anybody due to that. We actually have increased staffing now, and due to the arbitration, just the act of changing from a 35-hour work week to a 40-hour work week has resulted in 3.5 additional effective FTE to the schedule. So the schedule has been improved drastically, and overtime is beginning to go down substantially. To put that in perspective, before the arbitration, with the staffing that we had, we were scheduling about 120 or so hours a week of overtime in order to beef up staffing when we needed it. Now, with our most recent certifications, we're adding about 20 to 25 hours a week in overtime. So you can see we're expecting to save an awful lot of money in terms of the overtime expenses. But the arbitration did increase, going from a 35-hour straight time to a 40-hour straight time. So that increased their basic pay. That's a big accomplishment, and like I said earlier, we are going through the grieving process, but morale is beginning to start moving up. We just had our second Labor Management Committee meeting yesterday. After the first one about 6 weeks ago, that was kind of challenging. Yesterday, we were actually able to start rolling up our sleeves and dealing with things and working together again. So I'm pleased to see that. A couple other accomplishments is we implemented a regional text to 911 system. We're one of many agencies now in Oregon, but we were the first agency to accept an actual text to 911 call for service. I don't know if you heard this in the news, but one such call was someone who is unruly and intimidating passengers on the TriMet Max line. And of course, somebody witnessing that doesn't feel comfortable to pick up the phone and call 911 because they'll be overheard. So this caller or texter texted 911, worked through our agency, and we were able to find out where she was, what the next stop was going to be, and had officers waiting and arrested the guy, taking him off the TriMet. So that's one of many types of calls like that. Text to 911, our public education campaign in the metro area and statewide now is text, call when you can, text if you can't. So we don't want people to just begin texting us. It's always easier to talk to someone in person on the phone. Another major accomplishment is we replaced our telephone system, which, you know, lots of places do those kinds of things. But in the 911 realm, what that means is now we have next generation 911 capable equipment, meaning that when the technology is available for us to receive video or other types of data from a caller, we'll be able to process that. That doesn't necessarily mean the call taker will see what's happening, but it will at least be able to funnel through our system and then funnel out to the end user. So a police officer or a deputy, if they're responding to the scene of a crime, we can forward pictures or video of what's happening to them. Same thing with a medical call or a fire call. Responders can receive that information up front. Hospitals can receive information directly from the scene through us, ultimately to the ER if the patient's going to be transported. So that's kind of state-of-the-art stuff. It's not happening yet, but we have equipment in place that allows us to accept that kind of data. Our fund balance, we have $200,000 that we're putting in contingency this year, and that is aimed at potential cost overruns for a big regional, we call it CAD, it's computer-aided dispatch project that we're working on. This has been a lengthy project. I reported on it last year, and we're in the midst of it now, working with the vendor and multiple agencies. We're partnering with Washington County 911, with Lake Oswego 911, as well as Columbia County 911, so that we all will have the same computer-aided dispatch system, which translates to cost savings. This system's around $2.5–3 million that CCOM would have had to pay for by itself. But because we have this partnership, CCOM's portion of that is roughly about a third. We base that on the number of positions at each 911 center. CCOM's the second largest of all of those centers, and we make up about a third of the seats or the 911 call-taking positions. Our reserve fund is $430,000 and change. Those are funds that are set aside by the CCOM member board for future capital outlay. And some of the capital outlay that we're looking at would be replacement consoles. Believe it or not, those big consoles that dispatchers sit at, they raise up and down so dispatchers can stand up. There's lots of electronic gadgetry in them. They're very robust. They last a very long time, but they're very expensive. And we're talking anywhere from $15,000 on up to $40,000, depending on what features that you would get in those. So in order to replace them, we have to do it a pod at a time, which is 2 to 4 positions. So that adds up very quickly. So our members are wanting us to save money for that, as well as a logging recorder, other types of high-ticket items that we have to replace over the course of time. That way, when something breaks, the end users don't have to pony up and pay for it right away. Use of the fund balance that's not detailed in the contingency and in reserves is primarily due to unfilled dispatch positions in personal services. We have 6 vacancies right now. We just finished a recruitment, and we hope to be able to fill, I don't know if we'll be able to get 6 out of the recruitment. Our process is really lengthy, and to say the least, it's complicated, but we go through multiple testing phases, background check, psychological evaluation, and in order to bring on one dispatcher, in all likelihood, we've already vetted 2 or 3 others who have failed the background check or the psychological evaluation. So it's challenging to get the right person in the seat, but we do have excellent track record once they're hired in having the right people there. Our training program is renowned statewide. There's a lot of other agencies that ask for our assistance. And I'm really proud of the efforts. In fact, I just found out today, but we have to keep it a secret. Our training team won the state award, and they'll be honored in the state 911 banquet in October. So I'm very proud of them. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Congratulations, it's a secret.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Significant issues, I mentioned our CAD system, computer-aided dispatch system replacement. We're expecting that to be complete by spring of 2018. It's, like I said, we've been working on this for over a year. And because it's a multiple agency partnership, there's a lot of people that have to agree on a lot of components in this. So we're working together not only with the 911 centers, but also with all of the end users, fire agencies. Sheriff's Office, for example, is on one of the subcommittees. Fire District 1 is also on another subcommittee, looking at how it's going to work from the end user perspective. So like I said, we're expecting that to be complete spring of 2018. As I mentioned earlier, our department budget is $8.4 million. We have one fund, one division. We're not receiving any direct general fund support, and our major revenue sources, as I mentioned earlier, are from our member agency fees and the 911 telephone tax. Our major expenditure categories, $6.7 million for personnel, which is about 80% of our expenses. Materials and services are $677,000 or 8.1%, and then the allocated costs for the county, $333,000. And over the past 5 years, facilities has worked on various components of our building. One is well, the first 3 that I have listed there are partnership with Clackamas County Disaster Management, and Nancy Bush, when you see her, I believe Tuesday, will report. We have the same slide, so you'll see this again. We had the siding replaced on our building. Apparently the stucco that was on there before wasn't real stucco, and it started leaking. So there was a lot of sub-damage to the building as well. That was $450,000. We had an upgrade to our video surveillance system and added some video surveillance cameras around the building. And then the direct digital controls replacement is key card system upgrade. One CCOM specific project is a remodel for our restroom and quiet room. We have, if you've been there, and I'd be happy to give you a tour, but downstairs in the administrative part of the building, there's a break room and a quiet room, but there's no restroom. The dispatchers have to go through the radio room, which is in the back of the building, in order to access the restroom. Well, there's security issues with that. Not that we don't trust the dispatchers, but there's criminal justice information system security issues by having too many people accessing the radio room. So we need to move the restroom and shower. So we have an estimate from facilities management, which is $36,000 to move that, but it's going to require moving the quiet room as well, which is also in that same wing. So we're waiting for some revision to that estimate. I don't know if it's going to be higher than that amount or not, but right now the estimate's about $36,000. Yeah. That was the siding replacement, I think, was funded out of 2014 dollars, but it just happened recently. They actually just completed it a couple of months ago. Sure. Our financial trends, I mentioned tax revenue expected to increase this next year about 2.8%, but then it's expected to stay pretty flat. As far as expenditures, $604,000 is directly tied to pay increases due to the arbitration award. That award included, because there's a quid pro quo with arbitration, we were asking for the schedule. We had to pay for something. We had to give something up. And that included a substantial pay raise, hourly pay raise for the dispatch staff. That's the $604,000 plus cost of living increases that was withheld over the course of 2 years of contract negotiations. PERS increase, I think everyone's probably reporting that. Health insurance increase as well. But then we're looking at, and honestly, I'm thinking this is a pretty conservative estimate, but $125,000 decrease in overtime expenses. Right now, we're tracking that could be a lot better. But I wanted to keep it budgeted as is because of our CAD project and because I'm cautious. But our CAD project is going to require a lot of training. Once we implement the CAD, we have 32 hours of required training per employee that they're going to be going through. Our FTEs have stayed the same at 47. And that's my presentation. Are there any questions?
Yes, thank you. The numbers are going up. Commissioner Humberson's first, and then Tom, and then we'll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, congratulations.
Thank you.
On the secret.
Yeah.
Just two questions from me today. In your total general, or excuse me, in your total departmental budget, you show the two revenue sources of member agency fees and the 911 telephone tax,
Right.
but that only accounts for roughly 85% of your income. The other 15% comes out to about $1,260,000.
Right.
That's a pretty good chunk of change. What's the source of that?
Yeah, that's the ending fund, and much of that is going to contingency, as well as contingency and the reserves. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And then my only other question is, you were discussing the next generation equipment that you're going to be dealing with, and the thought occurred to me that if they're going to be able to send video, are you going to be able to archive that video?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's where the logging recorder comes in, and having to replace equipment like that. I know that, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds with the radio system replacement project, because that's a C800 project, and that it impacts us. But the logging recorder is part of that bond measure, and they can replace the logging recorder at least for radio traffic. I'm not sure if we're going to have a separate one yet for video. In all likelihood, though, when the infrastructure is in place beyond us, it requires the state replacing the entire infrastructure, telephone system infrastructure, to be next generation capable. And when that's completed, I'm thinking we're probably going to be replacing another logging recorder at that point, because it's probably going to take at least 5 years for that to happen.
The reason I asked that question is I could anticipate there would be attorneys that will be saying, we would like to subpoena that video, and if you, I could see a mandate coming down the pike saying you've got to go ahead and be able to archive it. So might want to plan ahead.
Yeah, there's actually the Association of Public Communications Officials. It's called APCO International. I'm on the task force. It's Aging in the PSAP task force, Aging in the 911 Center task force, but it's addressing those kinds of things. What happens with all of this new technology? How do we archive it? And they're trying to develop best practices because there's really no place in the United States that is accepting video like I'm describing at this point. But that question is in everyone's mind.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Tom?
I've got a couple of questions on your performance measurements. One is you talk about Tier 2 priority fire calls. What would an example of a Tier 2 as opposed to Tier 1 fire call be?
Yeah, so tier 1 would be, I'm trying to find the right page. Page 2 in the.
It's page 3 of the budget. I don't know if you have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have high priority calls and lower priority calls. Tier 1 would be, if it's a medical call, that would be an echo or a delta call. It's immediately life-threatening. Yeah.
Okay.
So a tier 2 would be not as life-threatening, or maybe, a broken arm, but it's not real serious.
Right, as
Those
opposed to a
kinds
heart
of things.
attack. Or stroke.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. So I'm still trying to get at a fire call. Is that meant to include medical? I mean, that is mostly.
No,
what they
it's
do.
not, and I'm trying to look at the description, if I can find that one.
It's just a slower response time. So.
Right, yeah,
And I
so
can
what,
see priority 1 being like a structural fire, maybe.
right, so what the member board, and I'm thinking this is gonna be changing when we start the MFR process next week. I have the executive board attending the first day, so they can chime in on what performance measures they really wanna see. But the fire agencies said, why don't we measure these types of calls for service based on what NFPA requires?
Okay.
But they didn't want to leave it at that because cell phones are an issue in the 911 realm. And, next generation 911 will help us with that. But right now, if you call Domino's, they know where you are. If you call Uber, they know where you are. We don't know where you are when you're calling on a cell phone.
Right.
So it takes a while for us to pinpoint your location. And because of that time frame, they allowed some call answering, call taking time in our performance measures above and beyond what NFPA
Okay,
would request.
so the fact that it's a longer dispatch period, you're allowing that extra time?
Yes.
Okay, well, that helps.
And that also explains why in the law calls, and again, these performance measures, they're measures. There's something for us to measure, and I don't want to say that they're not meaningful, but if you look at our law performance measures, for example, we're not meeting the standard. It's because of the cell phone call taking, call answering
That's
times.
interesting.
That's really the biggest issue that we're facing there. And law agencies didn't request that we have them dispatched within a certain time frame. They just asked that, okay, as long as you're processing the call within a certain time frame, they allow the calls to just rack in the system.
Yeah, it's
And
a little
when-
more critical in
yeah.
a medical call.
Exactly,
So, yeah.
exactly.
And then I just got a question about general vacancies. Do you have trouble like keeping full staff?
We have,
Almost fully staffed?
yeah, I mean, this is an issue nationwide. I've
Yeah.
talked to a lot of directors. It's difficult to bring in the right people. It's difficult to get them trained and up to speed because it's a really lengthy training process. It takes about a year to a year and a half to get a dispatcher certified. So in that process, what we have found through all of our testing and the psych evaluations, backgrounds, is we're bringing the right people on board, but even then, occasionally, they start taking calls and they realize, wow, this scares me. I don't like
pretty
it.
stressful.
It's intimidating. It's
Yeah,
very
I
stressful.
know some dispatchers.
So we'll lose some people through that. Most of our attrition, honestly, is trainees. Not that they're not feeling welcome or anything like that. It's because they're realizing, wow, this job isn't for me. I started in this profession over 20 years ago, and it was a lot easier back then. But now you throw in the stress of the calls. And on top of that, you're also dealing with all of the new technology that you're having to learn. So it's a real challenge.
Okay. And my final question is on the performance measure about decreasing overtime, and you're looking at decreasing it 28.8. Is that inclusive of the arbitrators?
That's exactly
All
what
right.
that's pointing
Okay.
to. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Ed?
Afternoon. I just wanted to comment on the stress of the calls and stuff like that. I can, as a cop for 30 years, I can't imagine sitting behind that computer screen, not only handling me, but handling the people that are on their other side of the call, with me demanding, hey, I need more information, and the dispatcher trying to tell them, hey, this is how you give CPR, and all because they're sitting there and they can't do anything. I can do something. I can drive there. They can't. They're just as involved or more involved than I am in the call. So it's a thankless job, and they do a great job over there.
Thank you.
Having said that, I have a question too. You said that there's a security issue with dispatchers walking across the floor, and that kind of piqued my interest because aren't they certified in
Yeah,
NCIC and LEDs? And
It's
things like
not walking across the floor, it's walking through the radio room to get to the restroom. That's what the issue is.
that? Why is that a security issue? I don't understand.
Well, it requires additional training. I don't know the details of it, but it requires additional CJIS clearance for them to access the radio equipment. And
Through the radio
it's
equipment
through the
room.
radio equipment room, yeah.
Okay, I thought you meant where the dispatchers were.
Yeah, right now they do it, and we do provide that additional training, but there's an added expense to that because they're required to have that, whatever that next
So it's through the
level is.
radio room, and I've seen it. and it's-
Exactly, yeah, it's in the back of the radio room, the restroom that the dispatchers tend to use.
Okay, thanks.
Eric?
Okay, Bob, just a couple things. On your performance indicators, I'm hoping that when you go through your MFR program, which is what you're doing, it's the same comment I made to the other group, is that you would include or increase the performance measure that you want, the goal, the target, if you will, and make it higher than what you're already incurring.
Yeah, I heard
So
that.
you've got something to reach for as opposed to, well, we did it, type of thing. The other thing is I noticed in the financial page 6 of the budget, that you have, you're going from 41 to 47 FTEs. That's an increase of 6. And yet the KPI for projected 17-18 to certify at least 3 trainees per fiscal year, you're indicating 5.
Right.
So it's gonna be 5 of the 6, and you'll have one that's not gonna be trained or in the process of being certified?
Yeah, well, because it takes so long for someone to train, we have 3 trainees in the pipeline right now
Okay.
that are various stages of training. We hope to hire, with this current recruitment, probably 4 out of the 6 vacancies. And then, depending on if trainees have washed out, we'll hire anywhere between 2 and whatever that washout rate is.
Okay.
To be able to get fully staffed. So our goal this year is to hire in August based on the existing recruitment, because we just finished the recruitment and we're scheduled for interviews. And then once that's complete, starting in August, depending on where we are, if we have enough candidates still in the hopper, if you will, then we may not have to do another recruitment. If we don't have adequate candidates in the hopper, then we're going to start another recruitment at that point. We are discussing open continuous recruitment, not for trainee positions, but for lateral positions, so that an open continuous is a little bit of a misnomer. It's really opening a recruitment and then having a closing date and starting it right back up again. But having continuous lateral recruitments so that we always have at least expressing that we have interest in laterals.
Okay. The other question I have has to do with, page 3 of your slide. Projected budgeted in Facilities Capital Projects Fund 420.
Okay, on page 3,
Let's see, is that the one?
says fund balance at the top.
No, I'm sorry.
Slide
Uh,
5.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
it's
there we go.
Page 2, I'm sorry, fund balance, where you got, if you look at page 2 on the slide,
Okay, I see it.
you got potential cost overruns of the regional CAD project. And you're saying your share is about a third, so that's $600,000 cost overrun. Who's managing the contract?
The contract is through Washington County 911. We haven't had any cost overruns at this point, certainly in the couple of years that we've been running it. But it's more of a just in case something happens. There has been a little bit of scope creep to the project in that the server farm, might be getting too far in the weeds, but the server farm originally was going to be hosted in Washington County at Washington County 911. What the partners want to do is house the primary servers here in the Clackamas County IT farm and then have a backup server, a full backup, which I learned through this project is something quite different than a generic backup system. A full backup requires all of the interfaces to be tied to it. Whereas a generic backup would be just the basic CAD system on the server with no tie-ins to the outside world. So what that means is if we had to go to our backup system, we wouldn't be able to talk to Portland 911 through the CAD system, for example. None of the interfaces would work. We wouldn't have interfaces to our medical system that we process calls through. So what we decided to do in the partnership is have a fully redundant, full backup system at Washington County 911 and have the primary servers here in Clackamas County. Because the servers are housed here, they already exist, and there's minimal expense to the partners by housing it with Clackamas County IT, but there is an added expense by making the backup server at Washington County 911 fully redundant with all of the interfaces.
Okay. And how does the CAD system tie in with the radios?
It's a different project altogether.
I mean, is there any kind of intertie? In other words, can a dispatcher hand off a call to the radio system and have it dispatched out? Because in the event of a major earthquake, you may not have a server for your 911 calls.
Right. And the backup to the backup is in-house CAD system availability.
Again, that's in-house.
Right.
It's not off-site.
Right, yeah, but each agency would then be kind of in their own silo. They wouldn't be tied together, but each agency would still have their own individual CAD system. If we don't have CAD, we go to pen and paper. We haven't had to do that in many years. I haven't seen a CAD crash like that. Gosh, it's been a long, long time. But our dispatchers do train in that, and if we lose CAD, we just go back to pen and paper. We have cards that we use to enter calls for service and ferry them from one dispatcher to another.
Okay. All right, because I was just wondering, because I know the city of Portland went through a big change and a big evaluation of their CADs, of their 911 dispatch system, and put it into a hardened building that's supposedly going to survive a major earthquake. So you gotta think way
Yeah.
beyond that.
Exactly, and that's actually one of our discussion points for MFR next week is our facility and adequacy of withstanding an earthquake of that magnitude, those kinds of things.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. You're doing a
Thank you.
great job.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? If not, we want to thank you.
Thank you very much.
For your good work. Thank you again.